Do you hear that? Listen very carefully. That is the sound of F1 fantasy managers across the globe scratching their heads as to whether the constructors are better or the drivers are better. So I'm going to try and solve the mystery, if that's possible, by going through this video. So I've set up, as you can see, we've got the constructors on the left and drivers on the right. I'm going to go through all the different ways that each of the two assets here, the constructors and the drivers, can score points, and try and weigh up what the best option is, because I know, like myself, and I think a lot of you guys out there that have been commenting on my other videos, the big decision is really going with that second constructor slot. Do we go with Ferrari? Do we go with Aston Martin? If we go with Aston Martin, it allows another premium driver. If we go with Ferrari, it means we have to go with a budget driver. So it's kind of weighing up what we're supposed to do, because I've been scratching my head over this since the rules came out, and I was doing some calculations earlier, so there's a little bit of maths in here. It's nothing too complicated, don't worry. But I'm going to go over the expected points, etc., of my own predictions of what I expect drivers and constructors to get, and then we'll sort of conclude in a few minutes' time. So on the left-hand side, we've obviously got the constructors and all the different ways that they can score points, and on the right-hand side, we've got the drivers and obviously all the way they can score points. So let's start off with the constructors first of all on the left-hand side here. You can see in the little sort of pink backgrounds there, we've got the two different ways that the constructors can score points. And obviously everything down here has also got ×2 because there are 2 drivers per constructor. So everything they get is like double the opportunity. That obviously includes double the opportunity of things like DNFing, which is not a great thing. I haven't included the DNF factors in here because you just can't account for it. But yeah, basically let's go through what the constructors can score. So qualifying, they can score points if their drivers finish between 1st and 10th place. Anything beyond 10th, they don't get anything. During the final race result as well is exactly the same. They finish in the top 10, they will score points. They get points for overtakes. They get points for all the positions gained by both of the drivers. There is what I declare, or sort of loosely term, a 10% chance of getting the fastest lap. When I say 10% chance, it's purely because there's 20 drivers on the grid or 10 constructors. So obviously you've got a 10% chance because there's 9 other constructors you're competing against. But obviously the better constructors like the Red Bulls and Ferraris have a much higher chance than 10%, I would say, on average. But yeah, just a rough guide for now. Then obviously constructors can also score points by their drivers reaching Q2 and Q3. Now this is a different bit to last season, because you'll see that this is only relevant to the constructors. Last season, if you were playing this game, this was very key, in particularly for the budget drivers, that, you know, if you got to just for going in, like qualifying in Q1, you get a point. Getting into Q2, you get a couple of points. Getting into Q3, you get 3 points, etc. That doesn't happen this year. Those points are not available. So it's basically only for the constructor that are getting those points. And then also up here as well, constructors will also get points for the fastest pit stops. There are 3 different categories of points available for that. So there's a chance that might happen for your constructor. And then on the right hand side, we've got the drivers. Now the drivers are being hit pretty hard by the points scoring changes. So let's go through what the drivers can do to score points. So obviously, when they qualify, the only points that they get through qualification are where they qualify. It doesn't matter if they get into Q2. It doesn't matter if they get into Q3. It doesn't matter if they beat their teammate. None of that matters anymore, like it did last year. All they're scoring points for in qualifying is coming between, you know, positions 1st and 10th. So that's a big detriment to the drivers this season. The same thing again for the races. If you finish 1st to 10th, then you will score the relevant points. You get a point per overtake on the track, which is like a new thing, and I'm not sure exactly how it's going to work out. So with my predicted points thing that I've done in this video, it's kind of, I've taken that into account with a little bit of a pinch of salt. But I have actually worked out that last year in 2022 there was, I think it was 785 overtakes. So, you know, just averaged it out across the 22 races, although it's not an exact science, because obviously some tracks will be easier to overtake and there'll be more overtakes on a track like, I don't know, well, Bahrain, for example, than there is in Monaco. That's kind of an extreme example, but yeah, so just averaged out anyway. Positions gained, drivers can also score points. That's relevant to where they are on the starting grid. And then again, they get these very small chance, a 5% chance of fastest lap. Again, this percentage is slightly higher for those who are in the likes of Red Bull and Ferrari. And then also driver of the day, it's just a bit of a lottery, because it's, at the end of the day, it's people at home that are just voting for people, so it's just a complete lottery of who gets driver of the day. Like you can have a really good strong performance, but people, I don't know, people like voting for someone else, and they'll get the vote, and your driver won't get it. So that's just a complete lottery. So overall, the drivers have been hit hard, particularly the budget drivers, because the budget drivers are very unlikely to actually get into the top 10 full stop. They're probably not going to qualify in the top 10. They're probably not going to finish the race in the top 10. So pretty much the budget drivers are fully limited to overtakes and positions gained. That's basically it in general. So yeah, let's move on to an example I've got. So this is, again, it's a lot on the screen here. There's a lot to take in. But basically on the left-hand side, this is an example I've used for Ferrari. So on the left-hand side, in the pink, is exactly the same thing that you just saw on the previous screen, all the different ways that the constructor can score points. And on the right-hand side, in the blue sort of background, is all the expected points that I've calculated. Now, please take this with a pinch of salt, grain of sand, whatever the expression is. These are all my numbers. These are the things that I've come across. You know, I used my spreadsheet from last year. I've worked out kind of the average overtakes or positions gained rather. And I've also predicted Ferrari. You know, if they're the second best constructor, I've sort of put them down as third and fourth. This is just complete rough estimate. This is no exact science. So I'm sorry if you pick Ferrari and they don't get 53 points, they double DNF. Please don't hate me. But anyway, let's go through. So if Ferrari are the second best constructor, then in theory they should finish third and fourth, or qualify third and fourth. That will give them 15 points. And then in theory they should also finish the race third and fourth. I know this is not going to happen exactly, or it might do, but you never know. But anyway, that gives you 27 points if both Leclerc and Sainz were to finish third and fourth. So for overtakes, like I say, on average last year, there was around 36 overtakes across the grid per race on average. That's obviously roughly 2 overtakes, or just slightly just under 2 overtakes to be honest, but we'll round it up to 2 overtakes per driver. Therefore, I've given basically every constructor 4 points, just kind of as a gimme for the overtakes, but that's obviously going to be the same as Aston Martin. And then also positions gained. So last season, I've gone off the stats I'd taken from my spreadsheet from last season. And Ferrari were really bad at positions gained mainly because of reliability issues and dropping back in the race. So they actually had an average of -3, so I've taken that off their total. Fastest lap chance, again, there's 10% chance of 10 points, which is, you know, it's nice if you get that as a constructor, but it's not super likely. But, you know, being Ferrari, it's more likely than Aston Martin, for example, probably, that you'll get that fastest lap opportunity. Quite often the fastest lap goes to like the person who's in like third or fourth position generally, because they've got kind of nothing to lose. There's a bit of a gap between them and the guys behind them. They just come in with like 2 laps to go, stick on some soft tyres and get the fastest lap, and that could quite easily, you know, fall quite nicely in the lap of Ferrari this season. And then you also, I've predicted that they'll quite easily get those 10 points. As a constructor, for getting into Q2, Q3, you get various amounts of points. If you get both cars into Q3, which I anticipate the Ferraris should quite easily do, they'll get 10 points. So I think those 10 points are pretty much a safe banker for Ferrari on any given week, barring any disasters. And then you also get the pit stop points. So you can get up to 18 points. So it's quite a high ceiling for the constructor. It's not very likely though. I'd predict much more likely they're even going to get nothing for this, maybe 3 or 5 points, and you know, it's possible they might get more, but I think on average you're probably going to look somewhere between the 0 to 5 in general. So taking all this into account, I've given the Ferraris an expected total of 53 points. So let's bear that in mind as we move on to the Aston Martin. So straight away your eyes will be straight away drawn down to the bottom right there. Total expected points there for 30. Again, I'll just quickly go through it. So this is again roughly guessing that Aston Martin. So obviously when Stroll comes back, or at the moment it'll be Drugovich and Alonso. If they're technically the fourth best constructor, arguably maybe better than Mercedes, we don't know. Until we see some practice sessions, but let's just predict for now that they'll finish 7th and 8th here in the blue section. That gives them just 7 points. Like that's, you know, if they qualify 7th and 8th, that's like really good for Aston Martin, but it's still only worth 7 points. It's not fantastic. Yeah, and then obviously if they finish the race in 7th and 8th, it's only 10 points. Like what? It's actually quite decent finishing 7th and 8th, but yeah, you don't get very much rewarded. This is once again arcing back to the fact that I think this entire point structure is really top heavy and it really favours the big heavy hitting teams. But yeah, let's move on anyway. So the average overtakes last season, again, we're just giving them the bog standard 4 points based on how many overtakes there were across the season last season. Positions gained, Aston Martin were a lot better at gaining positions last season, generally because they didn't qualify particularly well and then move forward in the race. Whereas if they've got a quicker car this year, we might not see quite this extent of positions gained because they're going to qualify higher up. They are a very reliable car from last year, as long as they can carry that through to this year. So they should like gain positions for people DNFing ahead of them. But in general, if they do qualify up further higher up, then I'd anticipate they probably wouldn't get quite to the heights of last season. I will say Lance Stroll, when he comes back from his injury, is not a very good qualifier, and that's actually going to probably work out quite well. As long as he, maybe, I don't know, it's going to be a bit tricky because if he doesn't get into the top 10, then straight away as a constructor you're missing out on those 10 points. You're only going to get 5 points from Alonso. So yeah, I don't know. But then also you'll get the points for Stroll moving forward in the race, hopefully. But either way, that's it's roughly 5 points per race, but I've not actually equated that into the total expected points because I've assumed they're starting 7th and 8th and finishing 7th and 8th. So I haven't actually included that. But you could, if you want, add an extra 5 points on there if you feel like it. And again, they get the 10% chance of the fastest lap. And I think for them, I'm not convinced that for Aston Martin that both drivers will get into Q3 on a consistent basis. I think Alonso stands a good chance of doing it the majority of the time if the Aston Martin is as strong as we think it will be. But I'm not convinced that Drogovic, and when Stroll comes back, I'm not convinced that either of them are that likely to get into Q3. Therefore, I can't guarantee that they're going to get these 10 points on a consistent basis. They might only get the one car in Fernando Alonso on a consistent basis. It all depends, really, if Aston Martin is as strong as we think they're going to be and how much Stroll can improve his qualifying this year. So yeah, maybe 5 or 10 points on average. And again, the same deal for the pit stops. It's got a bit of a lottery. Aston Martin, I think, are kind of more or less middle of the range in terms of the pit stops. So again, I'd probably anticipate 0 to 5. So anyway, taking all this into account, I expect the Aston Martins to get roughly 30 points if all goes fairly well. And there's no guarantee of that, let's face it, because Fernando Alonso's in the team and he's a troll. Right, so let's move on to the drivers. Straight away, again, you're probably drawn down to the total expected points here. So if Perez does as well as what I've got on screen here, comes second, like qualifies second, finishes the race in second, that's pretty much it. He's going to get himself 29 points, which is already like just Perez is equal to roughly the entirety of Aston Martin. Let's go back to Aston Martin. You see total expected 30. We go to Perez, total expected 29. Like that's very close. Just Perez like single-handedly like holding off Aston Martin. But either way, yeah. So I've done his prediction as if he's going to come second because I think Red Bull are the strongest. I think Verstappen's ahead of Perez, so I've put Perez down as second for qualifying in the race. Again, he's given the 2 freebie points for overtakes. Positions gained, he actually had a net 0 last year of gaining and losing positions across the entire season, so he averaged basically 1, so I just rounded it down to 0, so he's not going to get any points for that. And then again, he's got this small chance again, the fastest lap and driver of the day. So overall, he's going to be an expected points of 29. And we'll compare that to a budget driver. You can pick basically any of the budget drivers, but I've gone for Albon just because, I guess. And you can see straight away, look at the total expected points. Look how badly hit the budget drivers are being hit. And again, this is just my own prediction, but I've taken into account the ways that points are scored, and for the real budget guys, I just don't see them getting much more than that, to be honest. So the way qualifying and the race points work, if you finish 11, or if you qualify 11th for worst, or finish the race 11th for worst, you get 0 points. You don't get points for beating your teammate, like I've said. You don't get points for getting into Q2, Q3, etc. You get 0 points if you don't get in that top 10. It's crucial to get in the top 10. So we want drivers that are going to consistently finish in the top 10, and these budget options are just probably not going to do that very often. So anyway, overtakes, given him just a 1 point for overtakes, because this is based on Albon's stats from last season. He didn't do many overtakes in comparison to the likes of like Alonso and Hamilton, and Sainz and Leclerc actually did quite a lot of overtakes as well. So yeah, Albon, in that Williams is not a very fast car. It's not great for overtaking. So yeah, it's not great at all. Positions gained again. Albon is quite decent at the positions gained. He averaged about 2 per race last season. So it's not especially great. But then he's got almost no chance of getting the fastest lap points. I've given him a 10% chance, but it's probably more like 1%. And then driver of the day again, it's just a lottery. So overall, he's only got these 3 points from the average overtakes and positions gained. That gives him just 3 points, which is, it's barely nothing. So anyway, let's bring up the grand totals for this. We've got the Ferraris and the Albons, or, Albon's just there, the face of the budget. And Perez is also like the face of Like it could be him or Leclerc if you think Leclerc might finish ahead of Perez, for example. I'll just use Perez as an example. But you can see, the total expected points for the Ferrari build comes out as about 56, and the total expected points for Aston Martin and a premium driver is roughly 59. But then this isn't, again, this isn't an exact science. So don't just think, oh well, you're going to get 3 extra points if we go with Aston Martin. Let's just go with that. Job done. It's not quite as straightforward as that. But the other thing you have to take into account as well is the ceiling. Obviously, I've only discussed here the expected points. Now the ceiling is bigger. It's bigger. If we pop back for a second, let's just go back to the Ferraris for a second. The ceiling for a constructor is bigger, and the ceiling for a premium constructor is bigger than the ceiling for a premium driver. So let's discuss exactly what I mean by that. So if we look at the ceiling, if we add in the pit stop points, say they get like 10 or more points for that adds up their total to 63. If they've got a good chance of getting, they've got double the chance of just the premium driver of getting the fastest lap. So let's say they get another 10 points, that bumps them up to 73. And let's say they do slightly, the Ferraris have got a good chance of possibly even winning if they nail the setup and manage to outdo the Red Bulls. And I'd say they're more likely than like the Aston Martins, obviously, to actually get the win. So that could bump up their points as well. We could be looking at like 80 plus points for the Ferraris. And then if you take that, if we hop back down to likes of Perez, for example, the ceiling for a premium driver is not quite as high. Let's imagine he does everything like perfectly. Again, he could go up to like first place here. He'll get 10 points, that's an extra 1 point, moves up to 30, an extra 7 points there, that's 37. He gets driver of the day and fastest lap, that's 47.57. And he's not really going to get any positions gained or overtakes probably, because he's going to be first. So that's roughly like 60-ish points is the maximum he can get, which is considerably less than like 80, 90, 100 points for a constructor. So yeah, I think overall, before I started doing all these calculations and I looked at the balance of my team, and I was thinking, yeah, I don't mind having like Hulkenberg and Guan Yu Zhou and Alex Albon in my team. They'll be fine. They'll just plug away like they did last year. But actually, I don't know. I just don't know. I think overall, after actually looking through the calculations and thinking about this some more, and having done through my like team selection video and everything, I think I've not come to the conclusion, because I'm not going to come to any conclusion until we've seen all the practice sessions. But before I started looking into this in great detail, I was very much leaning towards the Aston Martin build. And now, sorry, I don't know why I'm like putting my fist into the camera. I'm just like, yeah, I was very much looking into the Aston Martin build. And now I'm thinking, because of the higher ceiling and the fact you only have to rely on 2 drivers to do well, you can just pick some random budget guy that doesn't DNF, like maybe Sargent, who'll just stay out of trouble at the back of the grid and accumulate a few points from positions gained, and just hope for the best. Whereas Aston Martin, you're relying on the likes of Drogovic and Lance Stroll to really boost up your Aston Martin points, and then you're really relying, you're kind of splitting your points 50-50 between these 2 guys. So you need all 3 of your assets, the 2 from the constructor and the 1 premium, to really pull their weight. And I think that these factors mean I'm kind of leaning more towards Ferrari as my second constructor, but I'll be very interested to know, as always, what you guys think about it. I've gone through this video, I've done all these calculations, and I've come to all these different conclusions, and I'm not sure it's actually helped me at all, but hopefully it's helped you, just like having me talk through it, and yeah, maybe we can actually come to some sort of conclusion and consensus as to what the exact template should be. But obviously we don't want an exact template, and the fact that it is actually really close is kind of nice, that there isn't an exact template, and the variation is good for the game. So that's kind of it. I hope that hasn't been too rambly for you. I hope you've kind of got something out of it. Let me know what you guys think. Are you going for the cheap constructor? Aston Martin looked like a good little bargain, or are you going to go for the more tried and tested Ferrari, or maybe Mercedes if you really want to go for them? Because Mercedes, I think they'll do better than what most people are expecting actually. But yeah, I think for me personally, I'll probably be going for the Ferraris and Mercedes. But yeah, I'm still undecided, to be completely honest, Aston Martin versus Ferrari. But having gone through all these calculations and done this video, I'm kind of more leaning towards the Ferrari all of a sudden. So it's just like, swings and roundabouts. So anyway, thanks very much for watching. I'll be back again for another couple of videos and live stream, that sort of thing coming up. So yeah, thanks very much, and stay tuned for more F1 Fantasy. See you later. Bye.